I'm Elliot Gerson, Executive Vice President of the Aspen Institute. Absolutely thrilled to see such an amazing audience tonight for the launch of our Winter Words season. It's special thanks and special appreciation to the Advisory Council for Aspen Words, the members of the National Council, all other members, and of course, all of you who are here because you either love literature, or you love amazing climbing, or you just enjoy the kinds of programs that Aspen Words puts on during the winter and the summer as well. This is the 22nd season of Winter Words, our annual author series that celebrates the best of contemporary literature. This year brings 7 great writers at the height of their careers to 5 different events over the course of the ski season. From tonight's memoirist and rock climber extraordinaire to Pulitzer and other prize winners, leading thinkers, journalists, bestsellers, it's going to be an absolutely amazing season. I bring the best wishes of Adrian Brodeur, who couldn't be here tonight, who directs Aspen Words. And again, let me just give a special thanks to the National Council and the Advisory Board for working with such conscientiousness and such dedication to provide such a vibrant home for outstanding literature in the Roaring Fork Valley. With that, it's my great pleasure to bring up Carolyn Torrey, Program Manager of Aspen Words, who is going to tell you about this evening's program. Thank you very much.
Good evening. On behalf of the whole Aspen Words team, thank you all for being here and welcome to Winter Words. I have several people to thank tonight. Our season is only possible thanks to a number of partners and sponsors. Our season presenting sponsors, Beth and Josh Mondry and Helen and Wally Obermeyer. Our media partner, Aspen Sojourner, thank you for co-hosting tonight's membership reception at the Opera Gallery. If you're interested in learning about membership, talk to any one of our staff after the event out in the lobby. Also, media partners, the Aspen Times, Aspen Public Radio, and Aspen 82. Our lodging sponsors are the Gant, Frias, and Aspen Alps. And our grantors, thank you to the City of Aspen, Les Dames d'Aspen, and the Thrift Shop of Aspen. Finally, thank you to Aspen Snowmass and Four Mountain Sports for helping get all of our Winter Words authors out on the slopes, and to Asburian Rug Company. Just join me in a quick round of applause for our sponsors. After the talk, Explore booksellers will be out in the lobby selling copies of Tommy Caldwell's book, The Push, as well as Penn Newhard's 50 Classic Ski Descents of North America. And Tommy will be around to sign copies, but we ask for your cooperation in helping to keep that book signing line moving along quickly because we have a hard stop at 7:25. And now it's my pleasure to introduce tonight's moderator, Penn Newhard, who many of you will know from the local crags and the ski hill. Penn left his job as a Wall Street municipal bond trader in 1989 to relocate to Aspen, which eventually led to a post as advertising director of Climbing Magazine. An accomplished mountaineer and father of 4, Penn has skied or climbed on every continent except for Australia. He is the founder of Backbone Media, a Carbondale-based PR and media agency representing brands in the outdoor space. Please join me in welcoming Penn Newhard and Tommy Caldwell to the Winter Words stage.
Okay, is that working for everyone in terms of the mic? Yeah, Tommy?
Yeah, testing. Good to go.
Great. So as Carolyn said, My name is Penn Newhard. I will be guiding this conversation here tonight with Tommy. Before we start, I do want to thank Aspen Words again. Thanks for bringing Tommy out and for all of you here tonight. See a lot of familiar family and friends out here, so it's great. So one thing I will say is, as a climber myself, there are basically three types of climbing literature. There's mediocre climbing literature, that is abundant, and then there's a lot of climbing literature that is basically only interesting to climbers and skier types. It's for the high geek threshold, getting into the details, and then beyond that, every once in a while, a book comes along, and it's just like it goes deep into that endemic side of that to the core group, but then it's also expansive and it's much more appealing to the broader base. And that's exactly what The Push is from Tommy. Unbelievable book. And as they said, you can get a copy outside, but wonderful book. Congratulations, Tommy, on that. So, before we get started here, we are going to roll a trailer to a film. So beyond being a great writer, Tommy has been in two major films this past fall, one being The Dawn Wall, and then the second was a film by Jimmy Chin about Alex Honnold, who actually free solos El Capitan in Yosemite. And Tommy plays a very prominent role in that as well. So before we get started and jump into that, we're going to roll a trailer here, and then we'll get started with the conversation.
Hello?
Hey guys, it's John Branch from the New York Times. How's it going up there?
Good, John. Good to hear from you, man.
Tommy, why are you doing this? What's the point of all this?
Climbing was kind of like the first thing in my life where I could stand out a little bit.
Tommy became known as one of the best young climbers.
He was super ambitious.
And I met this girl who was an amazingly talented climber.
It just clicked.
Yeah, I was like, whoa.
We got invited to go on this expedition to Kyrgyzstan.
Just felt like kind of a dream come true. We wake up with these piercing, close gunshots. The rebels start marching us on this 6-day journey through the mountains.
4 young Americans abducted by rebels confront a life or death choice to kill or be killed.
Ever since Kyrgyzstan, I just have this fire in me that is different than anything I've had before.
We've been following 2 climbers.
Tommy Caldwell and Kevin Jorgensen
making a historic climb up the side of Yosemite's El Capitan.
Will it pay off?
If Tommy and Kevin can do it, it would be the most continuously difficult rock climb in the world.
Day one.
Nothing else is even close to it.
This was always Tommy's dream.
He's put so much of his life into it.
You failed on this thing like 800 times. Give it up. Where are the lines between dedication and obsession? Why am I doing this? How can you continue to beat your head against this wall?
It's going to be now or it's going to be never.
I want this for him so badly.
Kevin Jorgensen is stuck.
What happens if he doesn't make it?
Do you say, you go ahead without me? Do you leave a guy behind?
Early in the morning, there's this one panel of the wall that illuminates first. And that's why it's called the Dawn Wall.
So Tommy, Happy New Year. Do you have a New Year's resolution?
To try not to get obsessed by anything too much this year so that I can focus, except for my family, of course. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Spend a lot of time with them. But I wanted to say one thing really quick. I really feel honored to be here tonight. Penn, thank you so much for recommending me to Aspen Words. I do a lot of events every year. This one seems to somehow make me feel like a bit of an imposter because of the prestige surrounding this place. It was funny. I still don't see myself as an author, so walking up to this building and seeing my picture with memoirs below it made me snicker a bit. But it really is an honor, and it's so great to be here.
Thanks. So, we'll try to get through this without superlatives, so I won't call you a memoirist, and we'll just go from there. As you saw in the trailer, Tommy had an unbelievable climb on the Dawn Wall, and it is considered, well, if we're not using superlatives, a pretty darn hard climb, and he's actually an okay climber. But so in terms of this, we'll start on the films, and then we'll get to the book in a little bit, but you've climbed more free climbs on El Cap than anyone else. And for the Dawn Wall, it was an 8-year love affair. Can you unpack that a little bit and talk about what drives someone to try to climb something over the course of 8 years?
I think I just sort of happened into it. I fell in love with El Cap. I got completely obsessed. I was pretty poor at most things in life. And it turns out that I was sort of good at climbing on El Cap. And so if you find that one thing that you're really good at, you kind of can't stop. And so, I went and I spent about 15 years trying to repeat all the existing free routes and then doing a bunch of my own. And then I got to this place where I wanted to really figure out what I was capable of. And I think that was an outgrowth of other things that had happened in my life. But I wanted to, I just had some questions that needed to be answered. And so it started out sort of in a place of curiosity. And then it turned into this total love affair with the process of being there. And so that's what brought me there year after year. Like the idea of not going and working on the Dawn Wall each year made me sad. So I kept going back.
So backing up a little bit, though, you said that you weren't really good at anything when you started out. And in the book, it talks about you like not really walking for a little while and kind of developmentally being, kind of taking your time. But I mean, what is it like to all of a sudden find that thing that really gets you excited and start to pursue that? Because I mean, as we were talking earlier, it's like when you found climbing, everything just kind of started to click. Is that true? Yeah, it really is true. And I think anything in life kind of needs both sides of the equation. And since I was severely premature, I was mentally super slow as a child, and so I didn't feel like I was good at anything. But yet I had this father who was, such a man and so much about like excellence and prestige. And so I felt like I lacked. And then when I found climbing, because he introduced it to me, all of a sudden I had something that at first I think I did it because I saw that it brought him joy, but at some point it started to build confidence in me. And so when I realized that I was good at it, it was a very magical part of my life. And so I think that's made it easy to be so singularly focused and stick with it in the way that I have. Yeah. And so tell us about the hole in the backyard of your house at Estes Park. You were digging a hole in the rocks. Yeah. And that was kind of when you were like 6, 7, 8-ish, or is that the story? Yeah, I think this is actually the first story in my book is a story of me being actually like 3 to 4 years old was the time period, and I decided I was going to dig a hole to China, and and there was the ground in Estes Park, Colorado. There's not really dirt per se. It's like decomposing granite, and so I would get out there with at first a shovel and just like ting 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 for like hours a day, and eventually I got a pick and I started using that, and after a year I had managed to dig about a 3-foot hole. And I think I decided to start the book that way because I was odd as a child, and that has led to some great things in my life. So, yeah. Odd but determined. Yeah, I like that. But so you climbed all these routes on El Cap, and then you decided to project the Dawn Wall. And in the book it talks, and in the film it talks about it going over 8 years. Can you talk about the partnerships? I mean, were people starting to question? I mean, obviously you had the resolve, just as you demonstrated as in your work release program at age 4. But what was that like, trying to find partners? Because that's a big ask. right? To get someone to go up there with you?
Yeah, I mean, the resolve part is funny because I think that digging a hole to China, as in climbing the Dawn Wall, wasn't for me so much about accomplishing that goal in the end. It was more about, like, I got addicted to the process. And you're right, it is hard to convince other people to come along, to accompany you on a project like that, because most people who join something like that are really going to be looking at it in terms of, like, what can we accomplish? Because it takes a lot of work, a ton of work. And so, honestly, for the first year, I didn't think that there was any chance I would find a partner. So I just went up there alone, and I would swing around and I'd camp up there. I spent many weeks up on the side of El Cap all alone, and it was, in some ways, it fulfilled that same sort of thing that digging the hole did. I think I like the methodical nature of being outside and kind of like working towards something. I liked working hard, but I didn't think anybody else would want to do that. So Kevin Jorgensen, who ended up being my partner, he just called me one day and he said he wanted to accompany me, and I was feeling kind of lonely. And I was like, sure, you can come and give it a shot. And I never really thought he'd stick around, and he did.
And so, without giving away too much of the story, though, Tommy and Kevin start climbing this route, which is considered one of the continuously hardest routes in the world. And Tommy starts having success through this one really difficult bit, and Kevin is struggling on that part. And at this point, the New York Times has caught wind of this, and the media is kind of gaining momentum on the story. And it seemed to me, well, you were doing the interview in the trailer with John Branch from the New York Times. Is it true that you actually chucked your phone off the portal edge, or was it truly dropped, or was it kind of semi-accidental?
It was accidental, but to give you a little context there, so we worked on the route for 7 years. Actually, I worked on the route for 7 years, and then our goal at the end was to, after we had figured it all out, to go back to the beginning and do a continuous push, and that ended up taking 19 days. And during those 19 days was when, when the story kind of went viral in the media, which was completely unexpected and unplanned.
But so as you're having success and going across, and Kevin is struggling, can you talk about the partnership there and the friendship that you forged? Because I think a lot of people here who do stuff in the mountains realize that, yeah, there's the element of going on the adventure, but it's really the shared experience that really is the test of time. So can you expound upon that relationship with Kevin? And was it hard for you? Because success was fairly, after you got through those middle pitches, it seemed fairly close, but you were, very determined to wait for Kevin. So can you talk about that?
Yeah, the relationship with Kevin is a fascinating one to me, because I think most of the real strong climbing relationships that I've had in my life are, those people that you're close with become people that you become quite vulnerable with. You talk to them about your relationship issues. You reveal a lot. Like, I think when you do something scary with somebody, it creates this vulnerability that bonds you very closely. And so that's one of the main reasons I climb, is because we crave that brotherhood or that sisterhood. Kevin was different. It was never like that, actually. He wasn't willing to be vulnerable. He's kind of a bit of a different generation. I went through a divorce when I was climbing on the Dawn Wall with him. He went through a major breakup. We didn't talk about that stuff. It was really quite strange in a lot of ways. But there was this sort of this underlying ideal that climbing is more about that personal relationship than it is about the accomplishment of it. And for me, it seemed pretty obvious. Like, the right thing to do is to wait for your partner. You don't leave your brother laying down in the field. And so I think in my book I didn't really even dive too deeply into this topic, but the movie really brought it out. And I think it's one of those things that it's almost easier for outsiders. It's more shocking for outsiders to look at that and see that as unique than it was for me. But people like to talk about it. I think it's the highlight of the movie in a lot of ways. And and it makes me appreciate it more. It's funny, sometimes you need an outside perspective.
So for the people here, can you talk about, give them an idea of just how hard some of those middle pitches were. I forget whether it's in the film or the book or both, but at one point you built your training wall, your Woody at home in Estes Park, to simulate some of the moves. Can you give them an idea of the exposure and the gear and some of the falls that you were taking? Just to give them a little bit of context, and then we'll move off of the Dawn Wall for a little bit.
Yeah, I think one of the things that fascinates me the most in life is taking something and breaking it down to the smallest little bits that it can be broken down to, and dissecting those and analyzing them. I must be a bit of a scientist at heart. And so one thing that I loved about the Dawn Wall is that it was so hard for me that it had to be climbed exactly perfectly. So on the hard sections, which is the traverse that you talked about, we had to analyze every detail of every body movement, really closely think about the angle that the rubber on our shoes was contacting the surface of the rock, the temperature. We would take sandpaper and razor blades and kind of shape the edge of our shoes. We changed our diet. We would eat things that would kind of fuel our skin from the inside out. I invented a new shoe. A company that I worked with invented a skin cream to increase blood flow to make it so we would heal faster. The hardest move I rebuilt on the side of my storage shed. I brought a tape measure up on the side of El Cap, and I measured out all the holds and took pictures of them and measured I downloaded an app on my phone that I could measure angles, and I mapped it all out as exactly as I could and rebuilt it at home so I could try it at my house. And I literally tried it probably tens of thousands of times in the off season. And so breaking it down to that level was absolutely fascinating to me. And then there's the element of trying to overcome the sort of guttural fear that you have up there. You talked about the falls. We were climbing on a lot of terrain where the protection is quite bad. So as you lead climb, you clip yourself in every few feet to different pieces of climbing protection. Some of them are quite good, some of them are bad. So sometimes when you fall, they just ping out of the wall, and so each time a piece of protection falls, you fall farther and farther, and that's pretty scary. And so it's hard to, sometimes we'd fall up to 100 feet, I would say. But if you climb with that thought in your mind that you're going to climb 100 feet, there's no way you can focus on all the little details that you're trying to memorize. So we had to spend a lot of time just trying to get ourselves to focus and gain trust in the gear. At one point, we decided to go to the top of El Cap and just tie into the end of a rope and tie the other end into an anchor point, like 50 feet away from us, and just leap off the top of El Cap and take this 200-foot free fall. And my idea was that we were never going to probably take a 200-foot fall up there, so if I had experienced that, then I wouldn't be thinking so much about it. That plan kind of backfired. I remember after that, every time I'd be above my gear, I'd remember that sensation of my stomach falling out and the wall whipping by really fast and the wind in my ears. Anyways.
Yeah, you might have overthought that one a little bit, yeah. And also, you climbed at night for better temperature and better friction. So, then when you do fall off, it's just like you just plummet into the darkness.
It's funny, we started climbing, the first season that we went up on the Dawn Wall, we started in September, and it was too hot. So the next year, we kind of pushed the meat of the season back to October, and then November, and then December, and then we started climbing at night. And we just realized that the colder, the better, really. It needed to be dry, but the rubber on your shoes is a bit harder, and your skin is a bit harder when it's cold. So we'd be climbing in pretty bitterly cold conditions, and that seemed to work the best. But climbing, 2,000 feet off the ground in the middle of the night when it's windy and super gnarly out is pretty scary. But after a while, you start to get used to it, and I started to feel like we'd bring these big lights up there, and I started to feel like the comfort of that bubble of light was a little bit like sitting around a campfire. You stopped thinking about the ground. It made it feel more intimate, and I actually really enjoyed the nighttime climbing in the end.
Yeah, great. So switching over, there was another film out this fall. As I said, it was about Alex Honnold, who's a very good friend of yours. And he ended up on the left side. The Dawn Wall is on the right side of El Cap. As you look at it, the left side is Free Rider, and that's the route that Alex free soloed, so climbed it completely without a rope. And throughout the film, Tommy is in that, and you know, can you just give a little insight to the crowd as to, I mean, in the film you talk about how nuts this whole thing was for Alex to even attempt this or consider it. And can you just expound upon that a little bit or give some personal insight? I mean, knowing Alex so well and knowing El Cap so well, what's it like for someone the audacity of that, to try that?
Yeah, I mean, maybe it's worth explaining for a second the difference between the Dawn Wall and Alex's climb. The Dawn Wall is, you know, the hardest physical climb on El Cap, but it's not, you know, all that dangerous. Alex's free solo of the Free Rider is, you know, arguably the most dangerous athletic feat of all time, I would say. And even though the climbing is much easier, it's like you can't fall. I fell tens of thousands of times on the Dawn Wall. Alex, when he free solos El Cap, if he falls once, he dies. So, yeah, I mean, and he's one of my best friends. So I spent a year kind of in and around his scene of making the movie and helping him prepare, and being stressed out by the whole thing, unbelievably. And on one hand, I feel like I knew that he needed this in his life, and so I wanted to up his chance of survival as much as possible, and that's why I was there for him as a friend. But I didn't want him to do it. And so I think that, I guess in that movie, that comes across a bit. I'm like I'm kind of the sane one, maybe, just making him question his life choices a little bit.
Do you think that having done that, will he continue on a similar path? Or, I mean, is that a pinnacle achievement for him? Will it be easy for him to back off that? Or?
I mean, I think Alex he's got to be one of the most, I mean, he's a true outlier. He's both physically and psychologically, he's just different than anybody else. And he's incredibly smart. And I do think that he understands that that is not a path towards survival. Like, if he kept pursuing goals like that, he would not live. And I think he's smart enough to see that, and so I do think he's going to back off.
Yeah. So switching more towards the book now, we touched on your childhood and digging the hole, and we touched on your father, who was a very positive influence on you. And so the first climbing competition, basically, that you ever entered, was at Snowbird, or the first major one, and you ended up being kind of like a dark horse, last minute kind of, we'll put Tommy in against all the best climbers in the world, and then you won that. Is that how that went down?
Yeah, kind of. I mean, I was just on a summertime road trip with my dad. I kind of climbed as a child because that's what we did as a family. I didn't know anything different. There weren't other kids climbing at that, back then. I'd go to places like Rifle, Colorado was one of our favorite places to go. And there was just really nobody to compare myself to. So when I entered that competition at Snowbird, I just didn't know that I was good. And so when I won it, and I knew that there was other people there that were, experienced and some of the best climbers in the U.S., that was sort of a illuminating moment. I was like, wow, I could actually pursue this and make a life of it. And so it completely changed my life, because I was climbing as a hobby, and after that I was climbing as that's all I thought about.
Right. So you at that point, there truly weren't really that many professional climbers in the world. I mean, there were a handful of Europeans, but so it was kind of an uncharted territory for you.
Yeah, and in the world of rock climbing, being a professional climber probably meant from sponsorship and competition winnings combined, you'd make $50 a month.
Yeah,
so not much of a profession.
Yeah. So that's why you still part-time live in the van. But so once you became sponsored, you ended up going over to Kyrgyzstan, to the Aksu area. And it's in the trailer, you guys go up on a wall, you and at that point it's your girlfriend, right, Beth, and two other friends. And all of a sudden terrorists show up, start shooting at you. And can you talk a little bit about, well, number one, what's it like to be kidnapped? And then what's it like to be unkidnapped?
Wow, this could take a while. I'll try and condense it. Yeah, that trip was, I don't know, I guess I think of my life in terms of like what led up to that trip to Kyrgyzstan and what happened since. Like it was intense in a way that changed me forever. And I was I wasn't really a professional climber. I had one snowbird at that point, but I was like I was a sport climber, a competition climber. I weaseled my way onto this trip in Kyrgyzstan as just the boyfriend to Beth, who was actually a North Face sponsored athlete. And then we flew into this remote mountain valley and found ourselves in the middle of this war. Our kidnapping happened because this rebel group called the Islamic Movement of Uzbekistan found out that we were climbing up this valley. They came up the valley with their long-range assault rifles. They shot up to us when we were sleeping on portaledges 1,000 feet up the wall. And we came down and we were captured as this kind of war broke out around us between the Islamic Movement of Uzbekistan and the Kyrgyz military. And we were hostages of the rebels. And we spent 6 days sort of fleeing with the rebels, had to abandon all of our food and warm clothing. We watched a Kyrgyz soldier who was also a captive alongside of us get shot point blank in the head. Had to sit on his body for like 4 hours as these mortars, and it was just like a full-on war and all the grimness that war is. And so, that kind of experience has I think it has the potential to do one of two things. It can traumatize you forever in a way that makes it hard to function in life, which it definitely had the potential to do that, but it can also illuminate certain things. And I would say probably I credit my dad's approach to me, to raising me, to sort of like preparing me for that moment, because climbing really is like, what he did with me as a child is he exposed me to like minorly traumatizing experiences on a slightly increasing basis over and over again. And so by the time I got kidnapped, I was kind of I was kind of ready for it in a weird way.
I have two daughters here in the audience. I just wanted to footnote that traumatizing thing just for you guys. But so you're trekking around, no food, cold nights, you're with your girlfriend and two other friends, and then an opportunity arises for you to push the one captor who was in charge of you guys off a cliff. Was that just like dead obvious to you? Like, okay, this is going to end badly. This is the way it is. I mean, can you talk about that a little bit in terms of the mentality or where your head was at there?
I would say early in our kidnapping, it became pretty obvious that in certain ways, we as the climbing team had the upper hand. We were used to this mountain environment. We had like these lightweight, sticky rubber approach shoes on. We weren't carrying a big, heavy gun. Our captors were in, these slick shoes with big army fatigues and these big guns that they were carrying. And so it became pretty obvious that we could potentially flee the whole situation. But the easiest way to do that without getting shot would be to find a way to overcome our captors. And at first there was 4, 2 of them disappeared. We were left with 2 at the end for most of those 6 days. And so Jason Singer, the guy who organized the whole trip in the first place, he was kind of the leader of our expedition. He very adamantly thought that we needed to find a way to overcome our captors, and so he talked for days. During the nighttime hour or during the daylight hours, we would actually be hiding in these small boulders under the ground, and he would just talk incessantly about, grabbing their jugular veins and, getting their guns and shooting them in the head in these really gory ways. And I was like, this is evil. This is not something that we want to be part of. Like, I was adamantly against actually taking matters into our own hands. Until the 6th night, when we were left with just one captor, because the leader of the rebel group decided to go back to our base camp to try and get food, and we were going to climb this really steep 2,000-foot mountainside. Rain was in the air, and we were already on the verge of hypothermia, so I was pretty certain that if a storm really came in, we wouldn't survive. And it was just dead obvious that it was going to be easy because we found ourselves in this very exposed terrain. We were comfortable as climbers. He was actually asking us where to go. We were pointing out handholds and footholds. We were boosting him up over the steep sections. And so, yeah, I mean, it's like in one way it was really obvious that was our way to escape, but it's not an easy thing to do, you know? Like deciding to take the life of another person is not an easy thing to do. So Jason, who had been so adamantly against this, he found himself unable to do it. And so I waited until the last possible moment. I waited until we were just about to top out the mountain. And I just decided it was the right thing, and that was our only chance of survival. So, yeah, I ran up behind him. I grabbed his gun strap and pulled him off the side of the mountain and watched him fall in darkness. He kind of fell 50 feet, bounced off a ledge, and fell out of sight.
And so, I mean, that's an amazing story, and I can only imagine the internal struggle there as a pacifist and, you know, peaceful person. It turned out that he actually ended up surviving, and years later, or sometime later, you found out that he is still alive. Is that a myth, or is...
No, that's true. Yeah, he must have landed on a ledge down there somewhere. We came back from Kyrgyzstan, and I think it was about 4 months later, a reporter found out that he was alive. And at first, we were like, this is not the case. Like, this reporter is just making up stuff to try and get to us. But then they produced a photo of him in prison, and in fact, he had survived. So.
Wow, have you ever had contact or Facebook friends? Any?
No. Although there's been 2 books where Kyrgyzstan was a pretty major theme. The first one was called Over the Edge, written by Greg Child. And during the research of that book, he, along with Jason Singer and John Dickey, went to Kyrgyzstan and interviewed Sharapov was his name. Interviewed him in prison.
Wow. So again, switching a little bit, you had an accident, and if you can hold up your left hand, just show people here. Yeah. So we were playing the thing about not being superlative. I think I'm safe to say that he might not be the best carpenter in the world, although he is quite a good carpenter. But can you talk about the accident and just the physical limitations, and then, you know, dealing with injury and recovery, and how you look at that moving forward as, you know, as a climber who relies on their fingers?
Yeah, Alex Honnold likes to call me the best handicap climber in the world. So I don't think that's totally fair because I'm only missing a tiny digit. But I think losing a finger as a climber, as I once knew it, was a career-ending injury. You know, at least I feared that. But I had sort of made this life of confronting, or I guess maybe my reaction to hardship was to use that experience to help me grow, or sort of like move me in some direction. And so when I chopped off my finger, I think all I could think about in that part of my life was rock climbing. I wanted to be a better rock climber. I had all these opportunities in front of me, and I wanted to pursue them. And, you know, I was right on the verge. I was making $48 a month as a climber. I could see a career there, you know? And so that's what I wanted. And then I lost it, and I was like, oh, this could be game over. But my girlfriend at the time, Beth, she, you know, there was this really impactful moment in the hospital where my doctor, who was actually a climber, came in, and he sat me down after about 2 weeks of surgery. I went through 3 surgeries as they tried to reattach the finger, and he came in and he said, "We've tried everything we can. We're going to lose your finger. You're going to lose your finger. We have to remove it for good." And then he said, you should think about what else you want to do in your life, because you're not going to be able to be a professional climber. And I think he was just kind of like vocalizing my fear at the time. And so I listened to him, and then he got up and left the room. And Beth turned to me, and she's like, "Fuck that guy." He doesn't know what he's talking about. And so I kind of held on to that, and I ran with it, and that was the right thing to say, for sure. And so I came back from that experience with this, like, I trained very methodically. I kind of doubled down. I focused more. I started analyzing things in a way that kind of turned into the Dawn Wall. Like I analyzed everything about how I climbed and what I did. I also shifted more towards adventure climbing. I could have gone more towards competition and sport climbing, but on one level I knew I could never probably reach my full potential with only 9 fingers in that realm. So it kind of put me in the world that I ended up excelling at anyway. So it was a blessing in the end.
Yeah. Fantastic. So you talk about the hardship, and you've talked a little bit about suffering. So where I want to spend the last few minutes is, you basically dropped out of high school to become a climber, and you did squeak through, as you said, finally. But the art of suffering, a lot of writers talk about, going into the pain cave and how difficult writing is. Do you see comparisons between the effort and sustained effort and suffering that you've put into the physical that you had to go through in order to write the book, The Push?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that I need the pain. And so when I decided to write this book, the first thing I did is I called up my good friends, Jim Collins, who's a really good business writer, and John Krakauer, who has written great adventure books, and or I guess all sorts of interesting books. But anyways, I had the chance to sit down with them, and I remember Jim first lamenting about the writing process. He's like, usually in the final stages of writing a book, I get like boils on my lips and I lose like 20 pounds. And then John Krakauer was like, you just got to think of it like ditch digging. You got to get in that ditch and you got to dig like 3 feet every day, no matter if you're feeling it or not. And I was like, man, I've been digging ditches my whole life. I can write a book. And so that appealed to me. And so anything that is good about this book kind of came out of that mentality. I spent 30 to 40 hours a week for a year behind my computer, totally obsessing about trying to make this book as good as I could. I gathered a team, much the way you do in climbing, of experts to help me do it. And it was really, it was just about working really hard.
Regarding that, there's a quote, I believe it's in the epilogue, that reads, "I always thought my deepest fulfillment came from the mountains, and that's why climbing has been my art. But as I wrote this book, I was surprised to find that the act of creating, even behind a keyboard or when speaking to an audience, feels deeply rewarding. Maybe all along the appeal has lain in the satisfaction of giving fully of myself. Maybe climbing wasn't always the answer, but the venue." So we have just a couple more minutes, and then we're going to turn it over to about 15 minutes of questions and answers. Before we do that, just 2 quick questions here. Who inspires you now?
Oh man, I find inspiration. I mean, I think the world of writing is kind of new to me and fresh and really exciting. I'm a little bit of a jaded climber at this point, so I think climbers inspire me a little bit less, but these days it's more like good writers like John Krakauer, since I know that guy, and I found a lot of inspiration in his writing. I don't know, like scientists, like climate change scientists and politicians that I admire. I mean, I find heroes in that realm more than I do in climbing these days.
Great. And then in terms of going back to climbing, are there some future projects out there that you're eyeing or would care to share with the group here?
I mean, I kind of can't stop going back to El Cap, weirdly. It's just like I'm so addicted to it, and it turns out it's a really good formula with my family. Like, they love living in the campground in Yosemite, and so we'll go there and we'll spend 2 to 3 months a year with my kids running around in the big magnificent trees and kind of experiencing Yosemite the same way I did when I was a little kid, and then I get to escape up onto the walls. And so I have another project near the Dawn Wall that I've been sort of dabbling on, is as much as I can. I haven't decided to fully focus yet, because I know once I do, it will demand a lot of me. But yeah, I mean, I still am out there. Like, climbing's my food. I have to continue to do it as much as possible.
Sure. And then last thing, and we touched on this a little bit earlier, do you think you'll take on another major writing project in the future at some point?
Yeah, I mean, I think I will someday. Like I said, my heroes are writers. I do read quite a bit these days, and I think I'm fascinated by the craft of forming a good story. And so I'll wait until there is a story that becomes something that I can't not, a book that is, I think the Dawn Wall became something that I could not climb, and I think a writing project is the same way. It has to capture me in a way that there's no option, but I'm certainly open to that.
Fantastic. And so now we have microphones on both aisles. Oh, we have a question right up here in the front.
Okay, so the question was, after how many falls would we swap out to a new rope? I know the ropes say that you're only supposed to take like 6 UIAA rated falls on them. I would just wait until I could see the core. But one time I did take a rope apart, and there's probably 100 strands of core material in there, and I took one strand and I tied a foot loop in it, and I couldn't break it with my body weight, so it felt pretty strong. Pretty good about it, yeah.
Elizabeth, right back there.
I'm just wondering, I know that you did a bunch of collaboration in writing with Kelly Cordes, and I'm just thinking about climbing partnerships and writing partnerships. If you could talk a little bit about that partnership with Kelly.
Yeah, so Kelly was my main collaborator on this book. I think I refer to him as my writing doctor. I wanted the experience of writing a book, but I knew I didn't have the skills to make it as good as I wanted to in the end. So I basically just called up my next door neighbor, who so happened to be a really good writer, and one of my best friends. And so our process was such that I hired him to work on the book with me. We would go generally on ski tours together and talk structure and kind of overall ideas. Then I'd come back and I would crank out the chapters. And then after I'd finish a chapter, I'd send it to him, and then he would help me kind of form and craft it in a way. And through this process, he became, not only my writing doctor, but my personal therapist in a lot of ways. And, one of my very best friends. I was incredibly lucky. I think that our working relationship was one that is a little bit unique in the writing world. I didn't have any holdups to being a good author. Like I was a D English student in high school, and so I knew the mechanics of writing were going to be quite tough for me. So I didn't, I felt like finding people to really help me through that part was necessary and a good thing. And so, Kelly was really incredible.
Yeah, thank you. So your kids are very involved in your life, it sounds like. So as a father, what do you think they are learning distinctly from you, from your example, from the lifestyle? And how would you feel about them doing what you and Alex Honnold have committed to?
Yeah, that's such a great question. I hope that what they're learning, and probably people other than me can probably see the situation a little more clearly than I can as a father. But what I want them to learn is this love of nature. I want them to be a part of this very vibrant group of outdoor lovers. I mean, it's funny, on the way over here, I was listening to a radio show that was talking about how 80% of people say that they're unhappy. And I'm like, in my community, I bet that's more like 10%. And so it makes me feel like the community of climbers and outdoor lovers, like that is really that's a pretty magic formula that I want to expose them to and show them, because it is like the places that we go are inspiring, and this sort of goal-oriented lifestyle that climbing or skiing or all these things that we do formulates is pretty magical, and I want them to experience that. I don't want them to die, though, and so I think I take the example of my father and try and do what he did, but dial it back just a little bit, because he did almost kill me several times when I was a little kid. And so, my children are 2 and 5 right now, but I imagine as the adventure the intensity of the adventure increases. I will be, as my father did, talking a lot about the risk and the preparedness and the kind of, cost. I mean, who knows? My kids will probably end up being chubby little tuba players or something, but I don't know.
Thank you for being here. How do you problem solve when you're climbing something and it's not going the way you think it should?
I mean, that's there's certain things, there's certain ways in life that sheer grit has allowed me to, kind of excel at certain things. But I would say if there's one just God-given thing that I've always had, it's this tenacity, this unbelievable optimism that what I'm doing is worth it, or that I will I enjoy it despite how kind of painful it might be. And so that's what I do when things get hard. I just go to this place of optimism and I focus on the growth and sort of the mechanics and the methodical sort of nature of just going out and grinding it out.
Hi, I'm curious what your thoughts are about how the process of filmmaking, what the impact it is on the folks that are climbing. I know that, in the Dawn Wall, obviously you had ropes and stuff, so maybe it wasn't quite the same as in the Alex Honnold Free Solo movie, but it seems like when you've got filmmakers there that it does have some impact, and I'm curious what you think about that.
Yeah, that's such a great question. It certainly has a lot of impact. On the Dawn Wall, in some ways it was a really good climb to film because we were climbing so darn slow, and you can fix ropes to the wall, which we did a lot of, and then the photographers can use those ropes to swing around and hang out with you, and so they were up there for parts of all 7 years, and we became good friends with them. And in a way, it was really helpful because if it was just me and Kevin up there, we might have gotten tired of each other after a while. But it was me and Kevin and Brett and Josh Lowell, and so it really felt like a team. And I loved that. I mean, they were almost my partners in a similar capacity that Kevin was. And also, I think, Kevin, like I said, he's like 8 years younger than me. I was sort of a curmudgeon when it came to social media. Kevin totally embraced it. I think having filmers and the idea of this becoming a film really was quite motivating to Kevin, and actually helped him along. Like, I remember we spent about 6 months climbing on the wall together, just me and him, and he was like kind of timid at times, which granted you should be if you've never been that high off the ground. He was just a boulder, and then we went to this side of El Cap and we're climbing hard moves and taking big falls, like 3,000 feet off the ground. But all of a sudden one day, Black Diamond, who we were both sponsored by, sent a photographer out to take some photos for an ad, and Kevin became such a badass. And I was like, wow, this is really helpful. It was like a big jump. And then that helped him gain confidence and helped push it forward. Watching Alex get filmed was really, really interesting, because this was a climb that he really, there's a high chance that he was going to die on film. And so watching Jimmy Chin kind of process that and figure out what that meant, it took an incredible amount of boldness, and it took faith in Alex that he was going to make the right decision, and that decision being the right decision was that he was going to tell them that he was going to climb based purely on his own internal wants and not at all based on the external pressures of making the film. And I do think Alex is one of the few people that could genuinely make that decision well.
Do we have time for one more here? Here in the middle?
Just a question about the human aging process catches up with all of us. When will it catch up with climbers like yourself?
Oh, it already has for me. Yeah. No, it's funny. It depends on the style of climbing. I think it's funny. I was talking to one of the best sport climbers I know, this guy named John Caldwell, the other day, and I think he's like 27 years old, maybe. And I was like, oh, have you had any aspirations to be in the Olympics? And he's like, I'm too old for that. So, for that style of athlete, maybe you age out of it quite young. But for more adventurous styles of climbing, experience is a huge part of it. And so you peak much later in life. But I will say that I'm not looking to top the Dawn Wall in terms of difficulty. So I do feel like I'm already on the downward spiral.
And then I think we have one more right here. Young man, can you just wait for the microphone for 1 second?
Why haven't you climbed in Australia?
It's funny that you mentioned that. I just committed to a trip to Australia this summer in July and August. So I'll be there for a month. One of the places that's been on the top of my list for a long time.
Okay, I think that does it. And thank you so much. Tommy will be signing books outside here. So if you can let him sneak through, we'll be all set.